Welcome to What's the Matter, the pod and videocast where we talk about anything and everything with a psychology twist. Today is part 2 of a 3-part mini-series all around living your life with purpose. And over the course of today's episode, my dad and I are going to be talking to you around the importance of personal values and how this can positively impact you in the process of goal setting. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy.
So this morning, I am joined by my fabulous co-host, Mr. Dad. How are you, Dad?
Very well, Em, thanks. Really good. Past few days, or back in lockdown, aren't we, obviously?
Yep.
In England. The last few days, weather's been beautifully sunny and autumnal. So
Yep.
I've been out playing dog
Rolling
walking.
in the leaves. Have you been rolling in the leaves?
But, out dog walking, a couple of runs. Went for another run this morning, getting used to that 'cause there's no golf at the minute.
I know.
So exercising in other ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very new to the dearie me, to the whole golf game, because I felt left out of the family WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Given that you, Mum and Ollie all play, so I thought, take matters into my own hands, try and become the best golfer in the family.
Yeah.
So I'm 4 lessons in, and obviously my new professional sport has just had to go on hold. But
Yep.
I'm visualizing it every day. I'm dreaming.
Your swing's coming on, isn't it? Your swing's coming on.
It is. It definitely is.
Mm.
But speaking of, extreme improvement, I wanted to just talk about this backdrop that you're showing off today. Your bookcase.
Yeah. I just thought we'd give, I'll say the listeners, really, the watchers, so the YouTube version, a sort of different backdrop, because usually I'm over that side of the office, which sort of behind a sort of quite a large sweeping desk with a window behind, and we can see it up the lane, as we say in Norfolk.
Yes.
I just thought, a bit of variety. So you get this drop. This is the standard backdrop for anyone who's in personal development and training and coaching. And
it's actually just a poster. So that's not even a real bookshelf.
Everyone thinks they're a guru, which I don't think I am, by the way. But yeah, I'm an avid reader. I probably did a count up a while ago, in excess of about 500 books. I just love reading. I did give a couple of clients, actually, a couple of client organizations, had a book clear out and gave them both quite a lot of books to start their staff library of personal development. This
is just a poster anyway behind him.
That's not, these are real.
Is it one of those things you pull a book out and it opens a secret entrance?
Well, it could be like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it looks very impressive. This is a bookshelf, but you can't see them.
I know.
Mainly just Mr. Men and Winnie the Pooh. No, they're not really.
But
really anyway.
Good stuff on here. Really good stuff.
Yeah. Without further ado, so this morning we are actually following on from our mini series within Living with Purpose. So in our last episode 1, we talked around the importance of clarity, how to gain clarity. We touched on methods of doing that. So we use something called a life audit within Mindspan, don't we? We just kind of shared that with the listeners, and why.
Particularly, I'm talking about clear current reality.
Yes, I was going to say. So
episode, weren't we?
Why that's so important in the present moment, the clear current reality for setting our goals. Today, we're actually going to be talking around the importance of personal values and setting those out. Not just the benefit, obviously this has great benefit in setting goals, but we're going to talk around some of the other incredible benefits this has on our lives and living with purpose. And then, episode 3, the next one. So in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be following up with getting our teeth into actually goal setting and the process that we follow for this to kind of pretty much make them foolproof. So they're as achievable as possible. So today, covering values. Obviously, you and I are very passionate around this, and Mindspan as an organisation, we're very passionate around having values. But as you always do in such a wonderful way with your beautiful voice, I'm going to come to you and say, for the listeners, why do you think having personal values is so important?
I think it's something that gets missed by forget the goal setting thing, just generally in life. Everybody, whether they consciously realize it or not, has a head full of beliefs and values and quite a lot of other stuff as well too, technically speaking. But our beliefs and our values really drive us, what we do, what we don't do in life, what we think we're capable of, what we don't think we're capable of. And Yeah, many years ago, in this whole clarity and purpose process, we decided to start having big conversations with people around their core values. Now, of course, we have lots of values in our head. What we're talking about particularly today is our core values. So these are probably to give them a little description, these are our highest level, most important values. And there's two types, which we're going to talk about shortly. But in terms of their benefits, obviously, when we come to setting goals a little bit later, so this will be episode 3 in the mini series, we need to be very clear about our most important core values so that we're setting goals that are aligned with those values rather than in conflict with those values, which no one would intend to do. But I do meet people who set goals that are in conflict with their core values and then wonder why they're not really getting on with them, or they're working hard, but it doesn't feel right. So it can really help us in a goal setting sense and to live with really clearly defined purpose. Being really clear about your values, your core values, can also aid decision making on a day-to-day basis, because you use your values as a checklist for the decisions and choices that you make. It can really help us behave more in line with the people that we really think we want to be or seek to be. I've done a lot of values work with clients individually and in terms of teams and organizations, and actually it can really help our own identity and confidence within ourselves. So yeah, those are just a few benefits of being really, really clear about our core values. But I find the more work I do on this subject with clients, the more benefits I go on to discover that I wasn't even considering, if that makes sense, beyond those.
No, definitely. I mean, I think I slightly touched on this from my personal experience in our last episode around what it did for me when I actually defined my own values and really understanding why a certain path that I was on that looked really successful, actually I wasn't happy about. But I want to just share a story that isn't it is about one of my coaching clients, but actually it's something I've seen across nearly all of them when, we go through this process, but one I've been working with recently. And when she first came to me, she was really, the biggest thing was she just said, Emily, I don't know why I feel like I do. I don't know why I don't like certain things. I just don't know why I behave like I do sometimes. Had a real distance from herself in knowing herself. And I said, well, there's a reason. But until we, dive deeper into certain things, you just don't know yourself well enough yet. We started off going through some other modules together, but mainly because that's an area she felt was quite important, but actually put that on pause. And I said, you know what, I know you might not think that, because some people don't realize how valuable knowing your values is. And I said, okay, I'm putting my foot down. I said, we're going to go through personal value setting. And and it's quite a difficult process sometimes, actually, if you're not too sure of yourself, to think, we're going to discuss in a minute, you're going to explain the different types of values. But as we were going through her sort of internal core, we call them intrinsic values, she was going through those. It was quite a tough challenge for her. Out the other side of that, she came to me and said something that, as I've had more than one client say, where they go, I just know myself better. Everything makes sense. All these things you might look back in the past and just not understand why you felt a certain way. She'd been seeing a guy and she couldn't tell me why she wasn't really feeling it, because on paper he had all these things that she thought she wanted. And when we went through her personal values of things that are important to her personality trait wise, there were some really key things in there that conflicted with so trust, communication and understanding are all really important to her, and especially communication. And that was something that really lacked in that relationship. And it sounds so obvious. Like, she kept saying to me, I don't know why I didn't see this before. I said, well, it's a small task that has such a huge impact. And you just become so much more, the world seems to make a lot more sense when you're so much more clear on what you stand for.
Well, I think there's two things you touched on, which I think are really important around our core values. One is self-knowing. And unless we reflect upon ourselves and clarify some of the stuff for ourselves as people, we lots of things become more uncertain. And we talked about clear current reality last time, about where is life at the minute. But before we start thinking about a clear future reality, we need to have some clarity around ourselves as a person. And so self-knowing, and I loved what you also said there around everything suddenly made sense, or lots of things made sense.
Yeah.
All right. So with that self-knowing, that self-knowing allows us to then know more about all sorts of stuff around us in life, and why we, as you say, feel in certain ways about certain things, why we make certain decisions without understanding it, but also really, moving into the future is like, what do we really want life to look like, and how do we really want to be?
Yeah.
And those are two key things, because most people don't set goals, not outside of the workplace formally in a written down way that we're going to talk about in the next episode. But people have some level of desire for certain things, and they aim themselves a little bit at stuff, but most people don't do it as in a slightly more serious way, if that makes sense. And I don't mean serious intense. I just mean I'm serious about creating the life I want.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And we believe, obviously, in within Mindspan, you really can't do that without some more self-knowing ultimately. Yeah. And just on the back of the point you were making around that client there, I did some work within the last sort of 18 months with a one-to-one client in professional football, an ex-player who's now coaching stroke managing. And our initial discussion was around self-belief and confidence building. But when we got early in discussion, we could have gone off in all sorts of directions in terms of his coaching, but actually I thought basically what's coming out in conversation was, I think he needs a bit more self-knowing. He needs to know what he stands for, because professional football is a lovely example of an industry or profession where loads of people have opinions about how things should be, how we should work, how teams should play, philosophies, all that sort of stuff. And he really hadn't created his own. So I think he's trying to be what a number of other people are around him. Key people he'd had around him. He thought, well, actually, perhaps I need to be like that, or perhaps I need to be like that, or perhaps I need to be like him or them. Actually, you'll find it easier to decide if you want to take an model an element of someone else if you already know who you are. So rather than go on into lots of other self-belief, self-confidence development, we started with values. Everything looked different to him after he'd done that. He was just looking through a totally different lens at the world, at himself, and actually, sort of metaphorically speaking, almost grew to 2 inches in, crikey, he suddenly felt more worthy, and actually had more self-belief, because he decided, I didn't tell him, he decided what he stood for. He decided what he believed in. He decided almost his own philosophy around himself and life. And then, we went on to build on top of that with all sorts of other work. So, I guess the point we're making, Em, is we're talking about core values in the context of goal setting and living with purpose. But when we're clear about our core values, there has a ripple effect in so many other parts of our life, really.
Yeah, definitely. I think even some of the actions that I took after going through my personal setting my personal values, it is really a penny drop moment with yourself where you think, I mean, this could sound, I'm not meaning to sound really brutal, but I then understood why certain relationships in my life, friendships, weren't right for me anymore. I didn't go on some sort of huge cull of like, you're out now, you're fired. I was Alan Sugar, you're fired. But I really did actually think these things are serving me much better than these. This is why I don't particularly enjoy being in environments with particular people that were in my life.
And sorry, this is just really critical where you're going with this. If I can just help to add, those relationships, you felt some discomfort in those anyway. I did. You clarified your values, you understood why.
Yes, it's kind of a similar thing, because I'd done my values in terms of goal setting, but when I went on an emotional roller coaster going through my last set of values, didn't I? I did. I just thought I knew something was wrong. Discomfort, as you say, could not put my finger on it. Really couldn't put my finger on it. I just felt all these things that are so important to me for me to give my friendships and my relationships. I thought, do you know what? I can't think of the last time I got that back. And it sounds really obvious. Like, why didn't I notice that before? But I didn't. I just didn't. And as soon as this became apparent to me, I thought, this isn't right for me. This isn't healthy for me. And I'm going to have to pull away. And I did.
And thereby is one of the challenges when we become really clear about our own core values is that obviously you live in a world where not everyone else has the same values.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not necessarily, I think this is an important point to make, it's not, in clarifying our own values, it's not necessarily to then go into the world and say, well, my values are right, so if yours aren't the same, yours must be wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
It's we don't all have exactly the same values, and we tend generally in life, as part of a little bit like human nature, we tend to gravitate towards similarity. So if I find people who think and feel a little bit like I do, then we have that in common. So we have common subject matter to talk about, and we reinforce each other's beliefs and values, and that's cozy and nice. But equally, we'll come across people whose values are often almost in direct conflict with ours, and then but at least we have some clarity and understanding about why we feel that uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And
that situation, and then we have a choice. Do I have other values which mean I want to stay in this relationship or in this situation because there are other values that are being met, even if some aren't, or actually is this in such conflict with my values or the things I passionately believe in that actually I want to remove myself or expose myself to this personal situation as frequently. So,
and I completely, just to echo you, I definitely don't have the opinion of, if you don't have my values, you're out of my life. I don't think like that at all. And there's a lot of, and I think it's good to have variety in the sort of people that you have, being around different values of others. And there are other values that other people have that are still important to me. They're just not in my core value. And especially in life, we are always going to have to spend time with people. It's very likely we're going to have to spend time with people that aren't, necessarily who we'd choose to, whether those are, colleagues or certain family members, or there'll be relationships in your life you don't have to have, but it's, if you don't have them, you're probably going to cause yourself some problems. But the thing for me, with the reason I made this decision about this particular relationship, is because I had chosen to have that relationship. Do you know what I mean? Because where I lived and just being a friend that I'd made, and it's not like I actually just how important just how important that value is for me. If somebody, we might all have times in our lives where we're busy and someone doesn't acknowledge you as much, or I am not needy or anything like that, but when it's been 2 years where you think, at no point have you ever stepped into my world, and I watch you on your phone all the time, when I'm so consciously giving my time to be present with you, that's just, for me, I thought, it wasn't one time, it was a long period of time where suddenly the penny dropped for me, and I thought, it's not right for me. And in setting those values, just bringing this back to living with purpose, I can safely say that having these values and making that decision, I know that I truly feel like I'm on a journey to living with more purpose. With the relationships where I can choose to be around people, I make sure I am around ones that really help me, really drive me in life. It helps with it does help provide purpose, as you say. And before we end up talking for a whole hour about my life dramas, or whatever we want to call it, I think it'd be a great point here, because we're talking about a concept here that we've not fully explained. If you'd be happy to talk about those different types of values we're discussing.
So just reiterating the point we made a little while ago, what we are considering here is our top level. We almost have a hierarchy of values. Some are absolutely really important, they cascade down. Some, it's quite important, that value, and some that are much less. So obviously we have a head full of those values as we go through life, and there's a lot of influence on those values. Obviously parentally when we're children, sort of the people we hang around with, through our evolution as well. But what we're really talking about here is actually, at a certain point in time, getting really clear about what we decide our core, high level, most important values are. And they're either values that we have that we want to have, if that makes sense. Equally, sometimes I think, and I've certainly been through this myself, we can actually highlight values that are aspirational. So, and I'll give you 1 or 2 examples of those shortly. Okay. But essentially, there are, when we're looking at values with our clients, there are 2 types of value, 2 types of core value. One is what we call intrinsic core values. Now, just as a little very simple definition, we classify these as our sort of moral and ethical ways of being, sort of stroke behaving. So these are values that drive sort of how we are or how we want to be. So you mentioned a few of those in your core values a short while ago, but I have, just for as a couple of examples, and obviously we're not mentioning these because we think the listeners or watchers should have these as part of their core values. These are just examples from our own perspective. I have simplicity is one of my core values intrinsically. So I want to make sure I in business and in life, I keep things simple. So identifying simplicity as one of my core moral and ethical sort of ways of being stroke behaving, that really drives me in business to sort of really try and keep how we evolve the business simple as much as possible, but also the way I behave and the decisions I make in day-to-day life. Just I value keeping it simple. I don't want lots of complexity in my life. So therefore, identifying simplicity as a core intrinsic value of mine really helps me. I'll give one other example would be, and I know you mentioned this a little while ago, it's passion. So obviously both of us share the intrinsic value of passion. That's why I do this for a living. That's why I've been doing this for over 2 decades. That's why I read so many books. That's why I love the work that I want to not be passionate every second of every day, 24 hours a day, but I want to have some aspects of my life where I can demonstrate passion, to be really enthused about something. And obviously the work we do tends to fulfill a lot of that value. So those are just 2 examples of intrinsic value examples of mine. So we have intrinsic, which really drive how we are morally and ethically, our ways of being, stroke behaving. The other type of core value we want to identify is what we call extrinsic values. So these, for the most part, are things outside of us that we place value upon. So these can be various resources that we have around us in life that we just decide are valuable, resources, other things outside of us. Activities probably fall into this as well too. So again, just from my own extrinsic values list, certainly as I've got older, probably Mum and I, Sue and I value nature more and more. And obviously nature is something outside of me. And because for quite a long time, I've probably valued nature more and more and more and more as an extrinsic core value. That's had part to play in decisions we've made in life. That's why we decide to live in the deepest countryside of Norfolk. Not that there isn't nature in cities, because there is, but I like this nature. I like the fact that we're surrounded by trees, we've got fields. I can go and walk the dog in the summer across, down the side of fields of wheat. The lane where we live, which is a dead end, we see deer, we see, birds, we see squirrels, we see all sorts of stuff down here. Now that wouldn't suit everybody because it's not necessarily on their value list, but it suits us. So because I know that's an extrinsic value, it has a part to play in what I want to fill my life with. I want to be in nature, quite close to nature. Time is another one as a sort of extrinsic thing. Now, time doesn't really exist. That's a whole philosophical discussion, but it's a human construct. But yeah, time for me as a thing is something I really value, a bit like yourself. So again, it has a part to play in how I am, how I behave, the decisions I make, etc., etc., etc. And I have other extrinsic and intrinsic values, but hopefully that gives a bit of a definition of what an intrinsic core value is, what an extrinsic core value is, and actually sit down and to really think about and decide what those represent for you. Now, in terms of numbers of values, there's no exact number we should be living by. I probably have identified slightly more intrinsic and extrinsic values than most people need. But I often say when we're running this exercise, just start off with anything between 3 and 6.
Yeah, I say that to my people.
You don't need 20 or 30 values because they're probably not all of those are going to be your core most important. But
yeah,
I adopted again in the last sort of year or so, when I added to my intrinsic list was kindness.
Yeah.
And as an aspirational core value of one of my intrinsic values, not because I think I'm unkind. I don't know, got to an age and the world is in a certain place, and genuinely, I just don't think there's enough kindness around. There is some, but I just think we should have more kindness in the world. Now I can decide to rant about that, think, well, there should be more kindness around, or I can think, okay, challenge yourself then, Gav. What are you doing about it? So actually, I thought, yeah, come on. And the fact it's on my values lists and I focus on this list, my core values, frequently. My values are on my phone.
Yeah.
So they're on my notes section, so I refer to them a lot on a regular basis. I test myself against them. I call myself to account. So at the end of an average day, I'll just have a look at my values list and think core values and think, have I been these today? Have I demonstrated enough of these? Have I got enough of the extrinsic ones? I've got enough of those things around my life. And again, and they become a code for living.
Yeah, they do.
They become a code for living.
Yeah.
So I've gone on a bit there. I appreciate
No,
that.
it's good.
I think it's really important we help people to understand what we mean by our core values.
Yes, definitely. And people will find things that work better for them. Like for me, I don't have mine on my phone, but my journal where I refer to every morning my affirmations and goals, my values are almost like, I think of almost like a key for me. This is just an analogy I understand best for myself, and again, it might not work for everybody, but I think if somebody was to hold that journal of mine, so that they would know me, it's almost me without me being a human body, so they'd know what's really important to me, what I'm really grateful for, what I've achieved, like my different journaling things, but it's almost an existence of me on paper.
An insight, isn't it, as a person?
Yeah,
it's a lovely way of expressing it, Em. So whether we put them on our phone or in a journal, or there are times when I've actually had mine on a list on the fridge, stuff, or keep them around, because we shouldn't just think about our values and think, done those and put them in a drawer.
Yeah.
Keep them, because they are, as we said, I think they're most valuable when they become a touchstone for us, or they become our code for living.
Yeah.
And ultimately a checkpoint for the goals we create ourselves as well too.
And I think just to help people with, so we're obviously talking about setting them, just going to share a bit of advice probably that I've noticed with my own clients. Sometimes people go, I don't know what words, where do you get these words from? And sometimes when you read them to people, if I read mine to people, they go, oh yeah, I think those, but actually you want to expose yourself to really looking at all the values out there. You need to physically look at them. So there's a link I share with people sometimes, but you can find it on Google, just of behavioral values or behavioral ways of being. Just Googling it and getting that list. There's loads out there. You could look at about
loads of lists come up in your search results. Lists of words, basically, aren't they?
Yeah, they're just lists of words. And the process I recommend doing here, and I know you probably do this with people as well, is maybe go through that list. There might be about 200 on there. There could be loads, but actually you may pick off about 20 at first, and actually explain to yourself or to somebody, or if you're having a coaching session with us, actually explain why you've chosen that. Because when you go through that process, what nearly always happens is you have 3 or 4 words that mean the same thing. So
very similar things.
Very, very similar things. So just as an example, someone recently I was working with had accountability, structure, and what was the other one? It was something again along that line of actually wanting, by having structure in their life, and it might have been processes actually, but having those 3 things can actually be explained in one. So whatever word you use to describe that, when you write up your values, I really recommend having a sentence to yourself to explain why that's your value, because there's no right or wrong one to choose. I mean, I have time on my intrinsic value list. You have it on your extrinsic. But for me, when I look at time, my explanation is all around my presentness. Yeah. So it's how I'm responding to time. Yeah.
That's interesting, Em, because on my intrinsic list, I have attention.
Yes. Yeah. So
it's for me, it's around wherever I am is being attentive. So I could be walking the dog. I don't want to be mentally somewhere else. I want to enjoy where I am with the dog. Yeah. I'm with you, like on this podcast, nothing else is happening. It's just you and I giving each other full attention. So if when there's probably a couple of steers I think I'd probably help people with around, if you get what we're talking about with core personal values and you have some level of understanding about the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic, not that matters too much. If something's valuable, just write it down. Yeah. Write it down. But for your intrinsic list, what you've recommended absolutely is, find a list somewhere. I've actually got one on the system. We've got about 400 or 500 words on it. So again, if anyone wants one, just a list, I'm sure they can get in touch and we'll email it to them. But it's just a list of words, and as you say, just scan through it and highlight the ones that just strike a chord initially.
Yeah.
Then go back through all your highlighted ones, see if there's any similarity between them, see if another word actually encapsulates it better. But you just keep filtering them.
Yeah.
I've not met anybody who just suddenly sits down, thinks about their values and writes them.
No, exactly.
You're going to create an initial list, and you can keep going back to it, taking some words out, putting some new ones in. I've sometimes been going through the values exercise, and I'll work at it, and then the next day I'm in the shower, and suddenly another word comes into my head. I think, much better word. Extra. So that's a great way of starting and then honing your intrinsic list of core values. In terms of extrinsic, I often say to people, or recommend, just think about things outside of you that you like to have around you.
Yeah.
So in terms of resources or things you think, well, actually, that's really important. That's an external thing or a resource. Think about activities you really enjoy. So what are some of the things that you do that you feel sometimes most joy or happiest or most content, or where you feel most good when you're doing it?
Yeah.
Those are activities that you value. So it's part of intrinsically. So, obviously what's gone on our list in the last year is golf, for example.
Yeah, golf. Actually, I need to redo mine and pop golf on there. But I have got health and fitness on there.
Yeah, I have physical health activity stuff. I don't want a life where I'm not physically active. I want a life where I am physically active. So that could be, I went for a run this morning. It could be getting on the bike. It could be playing golf, etc. So I know having a physical aspect to my life is so important to me.
Yeah.
Hence, once I know that, and it's a core value I've identified, I then make sure most of the time I'll usually have a goal that's expressed around some physical activity. So I've got a goal for next year around getting my golf handicap down to the 15, 16, 17, 18. So mid to high teens next year. So
my level, really.
You wish. You wish. Yeah. So again, just we've sort of defined, we've clarified with these are the most important, highest level values that we want to carry around. What we stand for, that express the sort of life we want to create around us. We've defined those as intrinsic and extrinsic. We've discussed the varied benefits of highlighting our values, and also, how people could go away and start to think about both those intrinsic and extrinsic values. Definitely.
So just bringing it back to what we're talking around living with purpose and ultimately goal setting. How will this help people with their goal setting? I know we've kind of said it slightly, but just, that's really what we're talking about today. So in the purpose of goal setting, how will this really, because a lot of people don't do this when they write their goals. So why, I know the answer, but I'm just, for sort of explain to people, why is this a vital sort of step in goal setting?
Well, as I said, most people outside of work don't formally set goals for themselves. They have aims, but what I mean by that is most people outside of work don't set goals in a well-structured, thoughtful, written down way. A few, a very small percentage, actually, not based on my research, but other people's research, a very small percentage. If we're going to go through that, if we are going to really think about life, we talked a lot about that in the last episode, really put thought into life as we go through it rather than just at the end of it. And then, we don't want to be people that have regrets at the end of life for things we didn't do. So we need to put more thought into life as we travel through it. One of those things is to know at any time where your life is. So where my current reality. And our goals really become our template for everything. Sorry, our values become our template for everything.
Yeah.
Our goals, if we eventually end up setting goals, which is what we're going to talk about in the next episode, for me, it's absolutely vital. They are aligned or congruent with, whichever word you want to use, our core values.
Yeah.
Inadvertently, some people that are quite serious about the whole goal setting thing, I have met some that set goals that actually they set them, they then don't really get on with them or take the actions, or they are, but it doesn't feel right, and they're experiencing some emotional discomfort about the whole thing, but can't understand why.
Yeah.
They didn't clarify their core values and then ensure that their goals are fit, if that makes sense. They're congruent or aligned with their core values. So I think highlighting our core values, both the ones we have that we want to have, or the ones that are aspirational, we want to become more of them. I just think they're vital.
Yeah.
If we aren't sure of this stuff, and it's not easy to be sure of it, if we're not sure of it, there are so many problems that come as a consequence.
Oh, definitely.
We become clear about them and really dedicate ourselves to them. We stand a very, very good chance of living a life with purpose and getting to 80 or 90 or old age and looking back with fulfillment and a level of contentment for the lives that we've lived, because we decided to live them in line with our consciously identified core values.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think there's some real within the Mindspan content we teach in our actual jobs. There are several golden nuggets of information within that, but of everything that we teach, this exercise around clarity, life values and setting goals, this was this is where I've probably seen the biggest change in myself, I would say, and where my life changed, but for the better, I believe. And I think personal growth is so empowering, and it's amazing to have gone through that myself, but now actually following in your footsteps and coaching people and watching other people have that penny drop moment, that realizing how valuable these values are for themselves is just one of the nicest things to see. So I know you
just on that front, sorry, you just sparked something in me, my apologies. But this whole clarity and purpose process in this little mini series of living with purpose is all important, obviously, and all aspects of all 3 episodes will contribute to what I'm about to say, but the values bit contributes hugely. They enable us to live a life that we really want to live.
Yes.
And because we have decided what those values are more consciously. If we don't do that, and there's a little bit of a vacuum there, we don't know our values, we don't have that self-knowing, we don't have the confidence of what we stand for, all that stuff. We 9 times out of 10 end up living someone else's life. The life that society tells us we should, or the life that our culture tries to influence within us, or a life that all our exposure to social media platforms tell us we should be living. Or does that make sense?
It definitely.
It really helps us, for me, it helps us to grab positively life by the scruff of the neck and say, this is me. This is what I stand for. This is what I want to spend the next X number of years creating. And it's part of your core.
Yeah. No, definitely. Honestly, I say this is one of the most empowering things I think that we do. And you did kind of just recap that following just with the last statement there. So I think, because I know this is probably a bit of a long one now that we've gone on for, because we are very passionate about this. If people can't tell,
that's one of our values then.
It is. Passion is everything. So I think what we'll do is, if you're okay with this, we'll sign off here. We'll be back again in 2 weeks, actually taking you through the goal setting process, because we follow quite a specific process for that, don't we, Dad? But if anyone that's listened to this or watched this has any questions around what we've talked about, isn't really sure, wants to have that list of words my dad mentioned, please, we are so happy to help on this, and kind of get you started on your journey. So please know we're here, and if you have any questions. But thank you so much for your time today, Dad. It's been
pleasure, Em.
I'm ready to go grab life by the horns.
Yeah. Let's go and live by our values. Come on, let's go and do it. Let's go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dad, and I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the latest episode of What's the Matter. My dad and I are going to be back in another 2 weeks with the final part to this 3-part mini-series all around living life with purpose. If you have any questions around what we've spoken about today, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful week.